The important part is your art is what communicates your feelings and your emotions. I mean, so much of art has been commercialized now. What gets lost in it is actually our own emotions and feelings. Think of it as a way of art therapy
For yourself.
for yourself.
Right. Hello and welcome to 7Robots.
Fantastically Terrible Podcast. Episode 18. Punch creative block in the face.
Today we're going to talk about 8 types of creative block that we've dealt with
Yes?
and how to slap them in the face. How to judo flip it.
Yeah.
How to
How
karate
to
chop
choke it out, do whatever analogy you like, punch it in the face, in the groin, you know. Creative block showed up, right in the groin.
You show 'em's
goodness.
boss.
That's right. So, things that you might get blocked by. The off day. Every artist has these problems.
Yeah, I agree with that. You're more on the art side and I'm more on the writing side. We both experience block. So this works for everybody.
Right. It could be something that you're usually the off day is something that you're used to doing, like second nature, goes wrong. For example, it could be an eyeball, a hand, a leg, whatever it is, and then you're drawing and it's just not working quite right the way that you're used to
How
doing
many
it.
times can you draw that same eye?
Yeah. And then you're like, it's the face, and then you're erasing it, and you're getting really frustrated with it. And, hopefully you don't pop a hole through the paper with the eraser. The best way to handle this is to walk away from the page. It could be your mind telling you either you're seeing something that maybe you've ignored for a long time, and your brain's saying you need to grow, or you need to focus on something else
Oh,
because
interesting. So you think it might be your brain saying, I'm bored. I need to do something more than this.
right.
Interesting.
So it could be that, or it could be you're noticing something for a long time that you've done, and it might not be right. It could be a growing opportunity.
Okay.
So 2 ways of tackling that is, well, obviously the first one is to walk away. The second one is, if it's really bothering you that much and you really want to dig into it, go and review the basics a little bit. See why it's off. Do a little bit of studying on it and try to wrap that around your head a little bit. It could help. But I still say walk away from the page for a while.
Would you suggest not doing any drawing? Maybe doing something else?
I would suggest doing some drawing, but doing something more loose and fun.
Okay, that's a good idea, yeah.
Just to sort of loosen
Loosen
you
up your hand, draw something else, whatever it might be.
Right. Because it could also be that you're agitated even though you're not aware of it, but your body knows, right? So there are many factors to it.
The pencil doesn't lie.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
I would agree with that for writing, except I don't know if I would go and write something else, but I might go have a cup of coffee, have a cup of tea.
But would you do research? Because research...
Yeah, I might do something else that I need to do. If I'm having an off day, I always have to do multiple things.
Right.
So I might say, okay, I'm going to put this aside, do something else that I have to do. There's always a website. There's always a podcast to edit. There's always a Webtoon, a tapas that we're going to be in soon. There's always something.
Yeah.
You could also go for a walk.
Sometimes going outside is a good thing. And I could tell you at the beginning of this pandemic, that idea of staying inside was like, yay, I get to do a lot of drawing.
Yeah.
But, we all have our off days.
Yeah, if it's an off day, that's exactly that. Just do something a little different.
And your mind might just need to rest. That's the other
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
Your
that's
mind
true.
needs to rest too. It needs to recharge. We're not machines.
Okay, so let's try our second block.
Days with lack of focus. So you're staring at a blank page. You know you have to get something done for a commission or meet a deadline, but you just can't get it out of you. And I think a lot of it has to do with avoiding. Our minds are not linear, and at least I don't view it that way. They're very elliptical. You have to know yourself. So if you're very pushed by a deadline, maybe it's better to set a deadline earlier, which will get you to actually work on it, or work on it a little bit at a time.
Like maybe give yourself a different motivation if you lack focus.
Right.
I see. So
Right.
for some people that would work. For other people, they might get more stressed out.
Right. Point is to get that engine going.
For me, reading helps.
Right.
Doing a little research, getting focused again on what I'm supposed to write, or maybe rereading what I already wrote.
Right.
Because sometimes a lack of focus is I kind of lose where I am.
Yes.
So if I look back at what I've done,
Yes.
I can get ideas for where I want to go.
Yes. I find that lack of focus for myself is in between projects. So you finish a project
You're
and
like,
then
woohoo!
yeah, there's that feeling of like I got this done, and then there's a period of like a day, feel a little lost.
Right,
So
right.
then you're like,
I
oh,
do
refocus.
notice that in you now that you
Yeah,
say
yeah.
that. That's
And
funny.
It's so refocusing. For myself, I would create a routine of like, okay, this is done now. Let's organize our thoughts as to what the next thing is to get done.
Right, and when you work on commissions, it's important, exactly what you're saying. Okay, what is my next project? Because you're not just an artist, you're also an entrepreneur. From that perspective, staying focused is you have to put your administrative hat on and see what you must do next.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And it's interesting because you do most of the writing, but I also do some writing too. I've noticed that each mode, whether it's writing, drawing, inking, and coloring, it's almost like a different mode in my mind.
Right, right. When you finish all the pencils, then you have a transition.
Right.
And you have to focus on the inks.
And the
And
inks,
then the colors.
yes.
That's a great point.
And, like the inks used to cause me stress a long time ago. They don't really do that as much. Because, figuring out color scheme can be kind of stressful.
I noticed you're like, you do little circles. You're like, I don't mean this in a bad way, but you know when a dog circles around? You're like that before you start your colors.
Yeah, colors are stressful for me. Penciling or drawing is where the creative aspect is at.
All right, right.
The other parts is just tightening up an idea that I already had. So each mode is a different way of thinking.
All right, so let's go to number 3, feeling intimidated.
You have an idea in your head, but you're intimidated to actually do it.
So what happens if you're sitting there, you have your idea, so it's not a matter of a lack of focus or anything that we've spoken about. It's
Right.
just, how do I start?
Yeah, this depends on your skill level because you might have a picture in your head. And for myself, I get maybe about 75% of that picture in my head drawn on paper. There's the other 25%, which I'm always chasing. I'll never think I'll ever get.
That elusive
Yeah. But
imagination on paper.
I've kind of gotten to the point that if I could get 80, I'd be really happy. The best way to deal with this is to slap it in the face by sketching. And what I mean is sketching out your idea. When I was much younger, I was taking art. They would show us a final painting from Picasso or a famous artist, but then they would show us all their sketches. So a lot of times when you go to a museum or you see a piece, you think, wow, they just did that. No, they didn't. There's a lot of planning to get to that point. So take your time to plan it, to sketch it. Don't worry about it being perfect.
Right, don't worry about the final result.
Don't worry about it. Work out things like first you worry about the composition. What's the composition that you want to put up? Then start working in, if it's human figures or animals, whatever it is, then start working on it and eventually build up till you get your color scheme. Breaking down the process for yourself instead of just sitting there looking at the paper going, this has to be a masterpiece. My sketchbook.
I noticed, especially when you're a beginner, that happens a lot. More and more they're finding paintings where it doesn't matter if it was Da Vinci or Caravaggio, it doesn't matter. They have multiple versions of the same painting.
Yeah.
And they find too when they do scans that the canvas was painted and then they painted over the original painting.
Or there might be a different painting entirely
Yeah,
altogether
exactly. I
underneath.
was just reading about that. Definitely do not think that it has to be the best, the first or second or third time. It does not. No, that pressure shouldn't be on your shoulders.
And, I've seen a lot of sketchbooks where people do all final pieces, which is good. You can do that. I mean, everyone has their way of using their sketchbook. For myself, I use it to work things out and to explore other ideas. So it's like...
Yeah, your sketchbook is like your fun time.
It is my fun time. It is my fun time.
Okay, so let's try number 4.
You feel like a robot
That's my
locked
robot
into
impression.
other people's work.
So you're lucky enough to get jobs.
A lot of commissions.
You're working commissions, but then the flip side of that is
Yeah, you don't feel like art is fun anymore, and you wonder why you even got into it.
Isn't that terrible?
That is
Everybody
terrible.
needs work. And then if you're lucky enough to get that work, then you start feeling like you're not working on your own stuff.
Right.
Everything has a catch-22.
Everything. So for this, before you just say, hey, I'm done, I'm out, I say this to you. Spend some time, even if it's 15 minutes, drawing in your sketchbook, fun time, for yourself.
Sketchbook fun
Because it will
time.
remind you why you like doing what you do. Because overall, you're feeling like a conduit for someone else's ideas. You're not you have your own ideas, but you're interpreting somebody else's ideas. So your mind does need to also express itself.
Right.
We're humans, right? So my solution to that is just have a little bit of time for yourself. It doesn't always have to be monetary.
Yeah, I think artists are very well acquainted with the non-monetary part.
Yes. But that puts stress. That puts stress because if you're not earning enough, then you feel
yes.
bad about
I
yourself.
have to say it's a stressful lifestyle, that's for sure.
If you're starting to earn a lot, then you're not doing the stuff that you feel you should be doing, which is your stuff.
Right.
So there's always that. So if you take a little slice of time, even if it's like while you're watching TV,
to sound boring, you make a schedule and
Routine.
make sure that you have time for yourself. And that's true for health, for all of those things, but it's also true for being creative. If you ignore that, you will reach a block that you can't get out of.
yeah,
If you're only doing work for someone else and you are a creative person, at some point you're not going to be creative about anything.
yeah, you're gonna
You'll
hate
be
it.
completely frozen and you'll hate it and you'll want to do something else. So it's important to take time for your own ideas, even if you don't have that much time.
Right.
You'll avoid exploding at some point.
And you can spend the time drawing while you're watching TV or listening to music or
Yeah,
something.
music is good. And music is the answer to all of these, honestly. Any block you have, put on music and it will help you.
Yeah, actually, I use music for getting me in the zone.
Yeah, it's
And I
good
like
for-
all types of music. When people ask me what kind of music you got, I like all types of music. So if I'm listening to a lot of 80s stuff, is probably I'm writing a retro thing or drawing a retro thing. That's how it goes.
Yeah. So that kind of leads us in very well to number 5, the blank page.
The dreaded mental block. You sit at a blank page and it stares back at you and you don't know what to draw.
It's slapping you.
Right. It's kind of like that whole Nietzschean thing, staring into the abyss.
You should draw that, a blank page with like fists coming out to slap you.
Slap you, yeah. The best solution is stream of consciousness drawing. And what do I mean by that? Well,
What do you mean by that?
there is a technique that people like Mobius, and I just gave it the name stream
Actually,
of consciousness.
Mobius is such a good example for this. If you ever looked at his work, it's gorgeous and you feel like you're stepping into a dream,
He is
another world.
he's an imagination nut. He explores the imaginary world.
That's why he's Mobius.
He's Mobius. He's awesome.
He will twist your mind.
So there's a technique in which you just start drawing anything. So you start out with a car, and then you just draw nothing in particular. You just let your pencil go, and don't worry about what you're drawing and how perfect it is. Don't even worry if the sketchbook page makes any sense. It's not supposed to. It's supposed to get you stimulated into letting your subconscious go out on the paper, because there's the conscious effort that we put every day, the daytime thinking, and then there's the nighttime thinking. And you let that run and you can get some really interesting stuff. And you're basically turning that creative ignition key and getting yourself started.
And if you're writing and you have the blank page, write whatever comes to your brain. Anything. I'm sitting here wondering what to write.
Yeah,
Trying not to hit the microphone. Trying not to pop my peas.
right.
If this happens a lot, your go-to response can be, for 15 minutes, I'm just going to write about anything.
Right.
It could be crap. It doesn't matter.
Right.
You can draw anything and you look back later and you think, that was nuts. But it really helps to get started. Number 6, procrastination.
My old friend.
And what do you do to deal with that? We're procrastinating talking about this subject.
Actually, we are. I try to basically set the deadlines in my head earlier. to
So you
force
give yourself
myself.
an early
Yeah.
deadline as motivation.
As motivation.
What if you're not bad with procrastination.
No.
Like you do have, as we talked about earlier, when you're
Lag.
in between, you have a lag when you're transitioning from one thing to another. But let's say you really have a problem with procrastinating and you give yourself an early deadline and that's not enough motivation.
I think then you need to set a routine. Time management is everything. Not to sound all military about it, but you do X amount a day, X amount of that, and so on and so on.
If you really have a problem with not just a little bit of procrastination, you have to set a creative routine. And it could be the time of day you work. It could be something as easy as that. You're trying to make yourself work in the morning, but you should at night.
Right.
It could be you're working against your natural creative self. So that could be an easy fix. As you said, you can make deadlines or earlier deadlines. But I think you have a point with that. If you really need to rewire the way you work, if you feel like you have too much freedom, too much time on your hands, give yourself structure.
Yeah.
If you feel like there's too much structure and you're being squeezed,
Then
then
you need
give
to
yourself
loosen it,
more
yeah.
freedom.
Yeah.
So you try to this one's hard because you have to analyze. If it's just a little procrastination, do things like that we mentioned to get you started. But if it's a real problem, then you have to force yourself every day at a time that you think you're more creative and just sit down and write or draw.
Right.
And then,
I could never use the word procrastinate with you. You're like right on time all the time.
no,
Yeah, you're like very scheduled.
I'm like you though. I lag between things. Like I'll finish one thing and then I think, oh, good, it's done. And then it's hard to go right back in the other.
Right.
I also work as a teacher and it is hard to work everything in.
Right.
And we have kids. So
Yeah.
it's difficult to work in that routine, but you have to in order to get everything you want done.
Right.
And we try to keep it fun. Maybe if you're procrastinating, it's one of those other things. It's intimidating or it could be stress. It could be lots of things.
You could also have a problem completing things.
Oh, yeah. That's a great.
Could have
point.
a problem completing things.
What's a way? I do know you do not have this problem at all. But there are people I've met who draw, who are beautiful, and they never finish their piece,
I've
or
had
they
many
start
friends like
writing
that.
a script and never finish it.
I have many
This
friends
is extra. This is an extra point that we hadn't
yeah,
thought of.
this is actually.
What do you do to help yourself finish something?
I think of myself dead. And then I think, gee, somebody walking by seeing a piece of mine and going, gee, I wish he would have finished that. And I'm like, oh, yeah, one day I'm going to be dead. I got to finish this stuff. I don't want my kids finding half-made stuff. So that really motivates. I know that sounds extreme, but my brain
You're
sort of works.
motivated by your post-mortem legacy.
Yeah, whatever that will be.
Interesting. Remind yourself life is short and you don't have too much time. I guess schedule is good for that too. Have a deadline for when you finish something instead of excuses for why you're not finishing something. From procrastination, we're going to hit number 7.
Being a perfectionist. Sounds great to be a perfectionist, doesn't it? But it's actually probably your worst enemy. And you know why?
Why, Miguel? Why?
Because you spend so much time hoping that you get 100% of that mental image or that painting or whatever it is that you want on canvas or paper
That
or whatever.
script, that book.
Yeah, whatever it is. It's not going to happen. And it's a way of, you could use it to procrastinate because you're like, I'm not there yet. It could also be another way of not completing things. So you start it, you don't like it, and you walk away from it.
It is paralyzing because you never finish anything.
And the best solution is a concept that I've adhered to since I was very young, and that is Kaizen. Kaizen is a principle made up by an American, but adopted by Japan. And this is how they went from being like a so-so manufacturing to this titan that it is now. When you think of Japan, you think of good quality. And it's an American concept that you never will reach perfection, but you can tweak things and chase perfection. In other words, perfection is an illusion. Okay, you make it, you look at it, and you say, I could have done this and this better. So the next time you go to do it, you then try to improve it. And you keep doing that over and over and over again. And you will see results, and you will start to complete things.
Right. And you have to finish it in order to then correct it.
Right.
So don't be an editor from the beginning. Don't edit yourself.
It's a different mental state.
Whether you're writing or you're drawing, go for it, do it from start to finish and then edit it afterwards. If you wait for it to be perfect, you'll never finish it.
Right.
Which is what a lot of people do.
Right.
Do not go back and edit your page. Just keep writing. You can read what you wrote or look at what you've drawn, but then continue. Don't start editing it. Editing is a different process.
And there's nothing wrong with different versions.
Exactly.
There's nothing wrong with that. Right now I'm writing my dad's family history, and I've written multiple versions. I'm on the 4th chapter now.
It's the Overton family history, not just your dad.
Yeah, the Overton family history. And I just go through and just write. Then you go through and then you put your editor's hat. Because being an editor and being a writer are two different skill sets.
Exactly. One, you move forward, and the other, you critique.
Right.
And you take time. So that's why if you edit while you're trying to be creative, they conflict.
It's like when you start to build anything, a drawing, a sculpture, right? You don't start putting the details. And I've seen people who go right with the drawing and they start rendering.
Right.
And then they'll look at the end and be like, wow, this is really stiff. Because you didn't work with the gesture first.
Right.
You got to work with the gesture, get the pose, and worry about the details later. If you're trying to impose the details onto a piece of writing right from the beginning, you're not going to get it right.
Right. We left the biggest block for last.
Yeah.
And that is emotional stress.
You know, there can be a lot of different things that sideswipe you. Loss.
The most extreme, you lose someone you love. I mean,
yeah,
grief,
and I've experienced that.
But it could be also financial stress. It could be anything at all. Oh my God, everything emotional can go into here. You're just feeling kind of sad. You're in a rut. Anything.
Yeah.
And that definitely affects your creative flow.
Right, and especially if you have deadlines and stuff, and you have to meet, and you just don't want to.
You feel overwhelmed. Everything could fit into this category. Yeah. Since everyone is different and the cause of emotional stress is different, we'll suggest small things you can do, little steps.
For me, channeling my art and letting my emotions meet my art, where
Great
it's not
point.
commercial,
Mirroring the two.
And just letting it out. If you're writing, write about that experience, because you need to connect with your inner self. This isn't a monetary thing. Or, if you've lost someone. When I lost my mother, I wrote a lot of my own little stuff, and I drew a lot of stuff. A lot of darker stuff. Same thing with my brother. So it's important to connect with yourself. For me, I don't look at my art as just as a commercial side. There is that part of it that I draw for other people, but I also see it as a way of connecting. It can be dark and grim, and that's not a problem. The important part is your art is what communicates your feelings and your emotions. I mean, so much of art has been commercialized now. What gets lost in it is actually our own emotions and feelings. Think of it as a way of art therapy.
For yourself.
For yourself.
Right.
And be happy you have that gift, because there are other people who go through these problems and don't have that way of expressing themselves.
Yeah, you need a release, and art is a great release for that.
Absolutely.
I'm thinking about Webtoon in our anthology, which is called Ghost Metal. And this isn't a plug, but it's short stories. And some of those short stories are dark. Crystal Clear, for example.
Yeah.
We got an interesting reaction from that.
See, art now is usually valued by how much it makes, not by how much resonance it has. So don't get stressed out that what you're creating isn't going to bring you money. Sometimes the art that you create is for your own...
sanity?
Yeah, you could call it soul, spirit, whatever you want to call it for. But you need to communicate with yourself. That's how I see my art. And if it's too much, seek out help.
Of course.
Great
point. We hope this episode has shown you problems we've had and some of the things that we do to overcome these blocks, these creative blocks.
Little solutions. The Fantastically Terrible Character or Creature is the entire crew from the hilarious Mel Brooks classic Spaceballs. For those times when you think you're surrounded by idiots, your worst fears are confirmed. Let's enjoy a clip from the movie.
Careful, you idiot! I said across her nose, not up it! Sorry, sir. I'm doing my best.
Who made that man a gunner?
I did, sir. He's my cousin.
Who is he?
He's an asshole, sir.
I know that. What's his name?
That is his name, sir. Asshole. Major asshole.
And his cousin?
He's an asshole, too, sir. Gunner's mate, first class, Philip Asshole.
How many assholes we got on this ship, anyhow?
Yo!
I knew it. I'm surrounded by assholes.
That's it for today. 7 Robots, Fantastically Terrible. Podcast is by Miguel Guerra and Susie Diaz. Our theme song is by Susie.
The best way to support our podcast is to leave a review on iTunes. This helps others to find us, and when we see your name, we can personally thank you live on the show. For more information on the episode, including links to anything we've referenced, please visit our website at www.7robots.com/podcast.
For something a little different, we invite you to read our free comics on Webtoon. Ghost Metal is a series of 100 original and horror sci-fi stories that you should definitely read with the lights on. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.